of the country. Heavy persistent rain then moves into parts of Scotland, especially the north and the east. Further spells of rain or showers across Northern Ireland, the rest of Scotland, Northern England. A quieter picture for the rest of England and Wales. Sunny spells and showers by and large, and still some warmth in that sun. In the southeast, highs of 25 or 26 degrees.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. But
And action.
Sergeant, the big green, my superstar panel that are already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views, and often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good morning. It is 9:30 a.m. on Friday, the 18th of August, and this is Britain's Newsroom here on GB News. My name's Tom Harwood, and I'm with Emily Carver.
You are indeed. Now, don't kill cash. The GB News big campaign took to Downing Street yesterday. The petition amassed over 300,000 signatures so far. And just hours after our team hand-delivered the petition, the Treasury has announced measures to protect cash.
Baby bust. Birth rates in England and Wales have dropped to their lowest levels in 20 years. So why aren't we having babies? Should we be having more of them? And what will happen to Britain if we don't?
And GP gridlock. The government is moving to tackle the 8 a.m. scramble to speak to a GP. There are plans to increase access to doctors from March 2024. But will it make a difference with NHS waiting lists being seemingly never-ending? We'll hear from a GP on what to expect.
And we want to know, should unlicensed pubs, pubs that aren't able to open ever so early, actually open at 10 a.m. for the Women's Cup final? Should those pubs be opening earlier, and should we get drinking earlier
Should they defy the law, Tom? We'll find out. Yes, should pubs defy the law and open at 10 a.m? But let us know what you think.
It's tricky because the government has said they want the pubs to open, but they can't change the law because all the MPs are away. It's a nightmare situation.
This is Red Tape Britain for you, but let us know what you think. Perhaps people will be too rowdy at that time in the morning.
I think people, perhaps pubs should just, perhaps the police should just turn a blind eye to pubs opening. GBViews at gbnews.com. Should those pubs get open earlier on Sunday? We'll have all of that to discuss, but of course first, it's your morning news with Jeff Moody.
Good morning, it's 9:32. I'm Jeff Moody in the GB Newsroom. Cash will remain accessible as part of a new plan set out by the Treasury. It comes after the GB News Don't Kill Cash petition, which attracted nearly 300,000 signatures, was delivered to Downing Street yesterday. A new framework will ensure that the vast majority of people will be no further than 3 miles away from being able to withdraw cash. And the Financial Conduct Authority will be given new powers to protect the provision of cash services. Sales in the retail sector fell faster than expected last month, the Office for National Statistics has reported. Retail sales fell by 1.2% in July. That's worse than the 0.5% that economists forecast. The decline was attributed to bad weather and shoppers moving to online retailers, which meant 27.4% of retail sales took place online. That's the highest since February 2022. Well, GB News can reveal that almost 25,000 asylum seekers have crossed the English Channel since Rishi Sunak became Prime Minister. 24,860 migrants in small boats have made the crossing since October last year. That means 1 in 4 crossings since 2017 have happened whilst Mr Sunak has been in number 10. While stopping the boats is one of the government's 5 priorities. All GP surgeries in England are to move to a digital phone system, potentially ending what the Health Secretary has called the 8 a.m. scramble for appointments. The switch is backed by a £240 million investment from the government as part of its primary care recovery plan. It's hoped it will allow patients to contact their GP faster and have their request dealt with on the day rather than having to call back. Well, you can get more of all those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com. Now, though, back to Tom and Emily.
A very good morning to you. Welcome to Britain's Newsroom here on GB News.
Yes, it's Friday the 18th of August. I am Emily Carver. This is Tom Harwood, and we're with you till midday.
We are indeed, and we've got so much to get stuck into today, not least, of course, this big question we want to ask you at home. Should pubs open early for the World Cup game on Sunday, even if they might not be allowed to?
Should they defy the red tape, go against the law and open up early just so people can get a pint before the game kicks off?
It's the kind of buccaneering spirit we need in this country, I think. But do get in touch. gbviews at gbnews.com is the address to get in touch with. But first of all, today, GB News took its 300,000-strong Don't Kill Cash petition to Downing Street yesterday.
They did indeed. Top stars from GB News, including Liam Halligan, Nigel Farage, Bev Turner, Michelle Dewberry and Patrick Christie's, delivered the message to the Chancellor's residents, urging the government to legislate to protect the free use of physical cash as more and more establishments go completely cashless. And in the last few hours, action has been taken.
It has indeed, and in a GB News exclusive, we've found that 25,000 migrants have crossed the English Channel since Rishi Sunak took office just 9 months ago. Let's get the very latest on these with our new political editor, Chris Hope, live from Downing Street. Chris, let's start off with this migrants story, because it is fairly astonishing. Rishi Sunak only took office 9 months ago. Why are the numbers so large?
Well, the numbers are large because the government hasn't yet controlled the border, stop the crossings across the southern border. We had that, didn't we, Tom, that pledge back in January, one of the 5 stop the boats pledges there from Rishi Sunak. They haven't quite got to 25,000. As of right now, the official figures are 24,860, 140 short of that figure. But going on the past few weeks and months, that figure should be passed either today or this weekend. And that shows that 1 in 4 of all these crossings since 2017, the 100,000 we reported on last week, have happened under Rishi Sunak, the guy behind me in 10 Downing Street. And that's why I think increasingly so this record is his to be in charge of, not just Boris Johnson, his predecessor in 10 Downing Street. And that's why the worry the government's got is, I've been told on good authority that the ruling on the Rwanda plan, which is meant to break the model for these people smugglers, won't come back from the courts until December. That's 4 more months of nothing really happening in terms of breaking the model. And until then, we're relying on support from France. We've given them hundreds of thousands of pounds to try and stop and pick up people on the beaches. We hear today in the Telegraph that, in fact, those numbers have fallen. Even the money we're giving them is trying to prevent these crossings happening. So it's difficult for Sunak. He's got to try and tackle this problem, but the tools he's got aren't quite working yet.
And Christopher, of course, it's hard to understate how big a problem this is for the Prime Minister. Last week, I think it was Stop the Boats Week. There were numerous announcements. And then we had the terrible news of a tragedy in the Channel, 6 migrants dying after their boat capsized. We broke the 100,000 mark in terms of migrant crossings since 2018 alone. It's not going well in terms of building public trust.
No, it's not, and it does poll very highly whenever we look at polling on this issue. People do wonder why, particularly those who voted for Brexit, the majority of the country voted for Brexit back in 2016, to get control of our borders, control migration. That's not happening, and they wonder why that can't happen. Of course, the answer is it's a very long sea border. Brexit means that the same deal over returns hasn't been brought into place, and they want to find new ways of ensuring that people do leave this country and are sent back to where they came from. So it's difficult, but it's almost a symptom of migration. Don't forget, the actual net migration figure was well into the hundreds of thousands last year. That's legal migration. We're talking about the illegal number, which is still very large.
Let's turn now to the Don't Kill Cash campaign. Some stunning pictures on the street behind you, and it was rather sunnier yesterday, and that petition handed into number 11 Downing Street. It seems like they're beginning to respond.
Yeah, I mean, only beginning, Tom. I mean, the guarantee from number 11 Downing Street overnight is that you can have access to getting cash within 3 miles of anyone living in this country. That is the same guarantee that exists for the post office network. I can't see what will stop banks shutting more branches and saying, go to your local post office. I think our campaign is important. It will keep going. It's about access to cash in shops. Really important note, I think, to keep it going, and it's the beginning, I think, of the government is listening, but by no means the end.
Well, it's fantastic, though, that this is starting a public, national conversation about the importance of cash.
Yeah.
For many people, it's just pragmatic. They need to use cash in their daily lives. But for others, it's about control, the government being able to control the way you spend your cash, even. So there are so many levels to this. And lots of people are writing into us this morning to say that other broadcasters now are talking about it, something that we've kicked off.
Well, that's right. I think GB News, by its nature being a startup station, we are totally in touch with all our viewers. We'll do all we can to help them to get results for when they need to. But there is a big issue here of people who can't get hold of a cash card or a credit card. The same issue exists for those who can't get on the internet. So quite surprisingly, for some people, there are well over 1 million people who aren't on the internet, and those kind of people need access to government services. And often, what happens in government is they think that everyone is moving and adopting new technology at the same pace as they are. That isn't the case, and it's very important that stations like GB News can stand up for people who haven't got that same access.
Well, Chris Hope, live from Downing Street, thank you so much for the very latest on those two enormous stories kicking off the show today. It is interesting, actually, looking at the inbox, and we're going to get to more emails a little bit later in the programme. But I find it quite interesting that some people have written in to say some other broadcasters are mentioning that the government has changed policy on this, but not saying why.
Well, exactly. But we'll keep fighting the fight, the good fight.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. What was it? Ronald Reagan once said, "It's amazing what you can achieve in this life if you're very sanguine about not claiming any credit."
Well, there you go.
Yeah, I don't think he used the word sanguine.
It's nice to see the top stars of GB News outside Downing Street, though, isn't it?
Especially on that sunny day. But we'll get more reaction on these migration revelations from the former Cabinet Minister and MEP Anne Widdecombe now. Anne, just first of all, your reaction to this number, 25,000 new arrivals illegally during the premiership of the Prime Minister who said he'd stop the boats.
Yes, well, he claims regularly that he's going to stop the boats. He cannot tell us how. The Rwanda plan is stuck in the courts. My view is the court should be obliged simply to speed it up because it is such an urgent national matter. But nevertheless, that's where it's stuck. He regularly pays large sums of money to France. And yet look at what happened with that tragedy in the last few days. The boat was hardly out of Sangatte. And the French, instead of taking it back to France, which is what they should have done in the interest of safety, if nothing else, was shepherding them towards our waters. So the French aren't taking this seriously, and it's a nonsense to suggest that they are. So, bluntly, Rishi Sunak has not come up with anything in all the time he's been Prime Minister except rhetoric, except saying, stop the boats. Well, yes, Rishi, when, how?
Anne, you say Rishi Sunak has been all words and no action. Do you not support the Rwanda scheme as a deterrent?
I very much support the Rwanda scheme as a deterrent, as I have written and said many times, but it ain't happening. It's stuck in the courts. And the idea that this will be the last ever legal challenge, I think, is fanciful. So, as I said, I think the court should be obliged to hurry this up because it's a matter in the national interest. Not just an individual case being brought. But the fact is Rwanda hasn't happened. So no good ask me if I support it. Of course I support Rwanda. I'll support Ascension Island. I'll support any a reasonable offshore facility. But it isn't happening. It isn't happening.
It is fascinating listening to our new political editor, Chris Hope, just then saying that people within Downing Street, within government, have told him they don't expect the Rwanda ruling to come until December now, right until the end of the year. And if in the first 9 months, 25,000 have come across, I suppose it only leads us to think that perhaps in the autumn months, if the weather is potentially more quiet, more calm, if we get this sort of late summer perhaps, these numbers are going to go higher still.
Well, the numbers are going to go higher still, whatever. We're going to get many more coming because there is nothing at the moment to stop them. There is no effective deterrent, which is what we could do. We could automatically house all new arrivals in secure reception centres while their cases were considered, and we could deal with them quickly and send them back if they didn't actually have a valid claim for asylum. And I can't see that any of them do. They're in a safe country. They're in France. France is under the rule of law. It's a signatory to all the conventions we've signed. They're safe in France. Now, if you're a refugee and you're desperate for a place of safety, and you found a place of safety, why would you then hurl yourself onto the seas to risk going to another place of safety? It isn't about safety. It's about economic migration. That is what it is.
Anne, what do you say to those who would say that all our efforts are essentially futile because we live in a globalised world, people are more mobile than ever, and that this is a global problem and that other European countries, for example, are dealing with it on a far larger scale?
I would say it is inevitable that people are going to try economic migration in the sort of global situation that we're in. Yeah, that's inevitable. What is not inevitable is the success of that. It is perfectly possible to deter people from coming here. You've got to consider the message that we're sending out at the moment, which is if you actually manage to get into Britain, by whatever means, you're very unlikely to be removed because we don't practice detention. We don't have national identity cards. We do have a flourishing underground economy, and we are just about the easiest country in the West in which to disappear. No wonder they want to come here.
Is that a call from you, Anne Widdecombe, to institute ID cards, to have similar policies to the French? That seems like a pretty top-down, illiberal approach to this issue.
Well, you call it an illiberal approach, but I think the interesting thing is that most Home Secretaries who have entered the Home Office opposed to national identity cards have actually left the Home Office believing that, yes, they have a role to play. They would have a role to play in controlling migration. They'd have a role to play in identifying bodies. They have a role to play in crime in general, and they could help. I am not saying do that tomorrow morning and we will solve the immigration problem. I'm saying that is a part of the attraction to coming here, is the ease with which people can disappear. Now, if you house them all in secure reception centres, they couldn't disappear. So you wouldn't then need the national identity card. So I'm not holding that up as the only option. I'm saying it's a contributory factor to why people come here.
And just very lastly, before we let you go, what is your view of the situation with accommodation? Because we've seen the barge, a few migrants went on it, then they were evacuated immediately. We're having problems now with RAF bases, essentially people refusing to live in the accommodation that has been provided. It seems it's farcical at this point, isn't it, really?
Yeah, that's why they shouldn't be allowed to refuse. They should be in secure reception centres. I'm tired of saying this. I've been saying it for more than 20 years, quite literally more than 20 years. It was a policy that I devised when I was Shadow Home Secretary, based upon what I'd actually seen when I was handling immigration in the Home Office. And that is what we need. And then there wouldn't be any issue about, where they can refuse accommodation. Their accommodation would be the secure reception centre. The only people who would come out of that into normal accommodation would be the genuine asylum seekers. And as I say, if you're in France, genuine asylum seeker would seek refuge there.
Well, Anne Widdecombe, it's always a pleasure to speak to you. Thank you so much for your views this morning on that news. Of course, 25,000 new migrants crossing the Channel illegally since Rishi Sunak took office. And I have to say, Emily, that what Anne was saying there, I think a lot of people, when they hear about the Bibi Stockholm and other things, they think it is a detention centre. Yeah. I think a lot of Brits already think that this is detention, when it isn't. It's just housing.
No, yes, people are allowed to move freely.
Yeah.
In and out. Is there a difficult one? The question of ID cards is very interesting because I imagine a lot of people who would be instinctively against them may be convinced that they're a good idea because of this migration crisis.
Or you might argue that if you stop the boats, it's not a necessary thing to have at all, and we don't need to go down the European model of sort of giving everyone a number in a state computer.
A little bit troubling, perhaps.
Yes. Let's move on to another big story now, because yesterday we got the sad news that the iconic broadcasting legend, Sir Michael Parkinson, has died at the age of 88.
Yes, tributes have poured in from across the UK and the world, with cricket legend, fellow Yorkshireman Sir Geoffrey Boycott telling GB News that Sir Michael was the soul of Yorkshire.
Well, we're honoured now to be joined by a close friend of Sir Michael and three-time Formula One world champion, Sir Jackie Stewart. Sir Jackie, thank you so much for joining us here on Britain's Newsroom. First of all, your lasting memories of Parky.
Well, he was a remarkable man in so many different ways. His television was absolutely spectacular, the best interviewer you would ever hope to meet. And most of the very best people in the world opened their ourselves to Michael Parkinson because he was just such an incredibly good man on that job. I did a thing with him a few months ago, live, on a tape such as we're working on now, and he was sharp as a needle. He hadn't lost a thing. He knew everything we had done together in various different occasions, because in my early days of winning Formula One races, I did several of his programs. But, you know, the lineup of the people he saw, Muhammad Ali, for example, or any of the enormously successful sports people, never mind anything to do with other businesses, if you like. He just was the ultimately best interviewer you could find, and that's the best thing I could say for him.
Yes, it's quite incredible and heartwarming how many tributes have come in. Elton John, Theresa May, Stephen Fry, Gloria Hunniford. So many people have given their tributes. It seems like he was universally loved.
Yes, and he wasn't just British, because he loved cricket, for example. And he went down mostly every winter to Sydney and lived there for quite a few months while the cricket was on. He was a very versatile man. But, you know, I got to know him because we all used to go to the same tailor. And a great collection of people, an amazing collection of people. Doug was the I won't go into his details, was the tailor. And he just collected from the Rothschilds to the Jackie Stewarts. Michael Parkinson was one of his best friends, and he just was the best man. It was like going in for a cup of coffee. You went to see them, and who would be there? Michael Parkinson, because the two of them got so well together. He was just the perfect introducer. You know, a man like Muhammad Ali, who was traveling all around the world, in every city that he went to, he would be interviewed. When I saw him in Las Vegas one of those times, I went up and had a chat with him because I'd met him in my days of working at American television. And one of the first things he said to me, "Bill, have you seen Michael recently?" He just thought Michael Parkinson was fantastic. And I think that applies to almost everybody who ever did anything on any of his shows. He had such charm, but he knew exactly what he was doing. Really precise man.
It's such a unique talent, because I'm certain that millions of people, not just in this country but around the world, will feel like they knew Michael Parkinson, even if they never met him, even if they never were in the same room as him. There was that sort of warmth, conversational, friendly style that he had. In your experience, knowing him behind closed doors as well as sort of his more public exploits, was he the same behind the scenes?
Well, he was no different. He was a man who what you saw was what you got. He was never presenting himself in a way that would seem to be better for him. It was his way of doing television very successfully as a professional. And he, because of his skills, attracted more people to his shows. I don't imagine there was anyone who turned down Michael Parkinson. If there were movie stars coming in from every corner of the world, if there were big ones at the time, Michael Parkinson would be on them, and they would walk away thrilled that they had been with Michael Parkinson. I think that's one of the nicest things. And as I say, just in a matter of 2 weeks from now, he was going to come to my home with his wife and his son to have lunch. And of course, no longer can that happen, which is a tremendous loss. He was such a wonderful man.
Huge loss for the whole country. And Sir Jackie, thank you so much for telling us your very personal experience then, and condolences, of course, to you for the loss of your friend. Thank you so much for joining us. Well, coming up, we're going to be talking about so many big stories, not least energy security in the United Kingdom. Don't go anywhere.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, a very good morning to you. It's Aidan McKibben here from the Met Office. It's a windy start to the day, and you'll notice the humidity out there, even if it's not especially sunny. That humidity, along with some instability, courtesy of low pressure to the southwest, leading to the risk of thunderstorms across central and southern parts during the morning this morning. Could cause some impacts with frequent lightning and some intense bursts of rain, but as always, these thunderstorms will be hit and miss, and they do tend to die away as they push northeastwards during the morning. Northern Scotland staying fine, southwest England largely fine as well. Some sunshine coming through, but a lot of cloud and a strong wind, especially for northwest Wales. 50-mile-per-hour wind gusts could impact people on their holidays, for example. Then, well, it gets very lively overnight. A band of heavy rain moves into southwestern areas. That pushes into the rest of England, into Northern Ireland, southern Scotland by midnight. And at the same time, there's the risk of some serious thunderstorms developing across eastern England. Frequent lightning, large hail, intense outbreaks of rain. It's also going to be a windy night and a muggy night. 18, 19 Celsius across some parts of southern UK and mid to high teens widely by dawn across many parts of the country. Heavy persistent rain then moves into parts of Scotland, especially the north and the east. Further spells of rain or showers across Northern Ireland, the rest of Scotland, northern England. A quieter picture for the rest of England and Wales. Sunny spells and showers by and large, and still some warmth in that sun. In the southeast, highs of 25 or 26 degrees.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "No, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
is the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
It's 10 a.m. It is Friday, the 18th of August, and this is Britain's Newsroom with me, Emily Carver, and Tom Harwood.
And a GB News victory. GB News' ongoing campaign continues to gain momentum after being presented at Downing Street yesterday. Our economics and business editor Liam Halligan will join us very shortly to get the very latest after the government has announced changes.
Yes, inflation nation too. Inflation, mortgages, cost of living, the things that really matter to everyone. But what does it all mean? The former city editor of The Telegraph will join us to delve further into what this means for you and me.
NIMBY nightmare. Is NIMBYism killing the chances of Britain leading the way on energy? Should we be concerned about plummeting birth rates as well? Two big questions with two experts giving their views.
And should your local pub defy the law and open at 10 a.m. before the Women's World Cup final?
Well, this is, of course, the very difficult situation where the government has said it would like to have pubs open at 10 a.m, but can't change the law because all the MPs are on holiday and they can't come back to Westminster.
The Liberal Democrats have said, no, all the MPs should come back to Parliament to vote on
drink
this.
for what, 2 more hours? Email in gbviews@gbnews.com is the address. What are your thoughts? Should pubs defy the law? Should perhaps the law turn a bit of a blind eye? We'll be getting into all of that coming up after your morning headlines with Jeff Moody.
Good morning, it's 1 minute past 10. I'm Jeff Moody in the GB Newsroom. Cash will remain accessible as part of a new plan set out by the Treasury. It comes after the GB News Don't Kill Cash petition, which attracted nearly 300,000 signatures, was delivered to Downing Street yesterday. A new framework would ensure that the vast majority of people will be no further than 3 miles away from being able to withdraw cash. And the Financial Conduct Authority will be given new powers to protect the provision of cash services. Economic Secretary to the Treasury, Andrew Griffith, says it's good for vulnerable people.
Cash is important. It's here to stay for the long term. Many people, the elderly, the vulnerable, particularly rural communities, do depend on that access to cash. And if we want our shops to continue to take cash over the counter, then of course those businesses have got to have somewhere to deposit it. So the rules that we're announcing also cover the ability of businesses to deposit cash in a location that's convenient to them.
Sales in the retail sector fell faster than expected last month, according to the Office for National Statistics. Retail sales fell by 1.2% in July. That's worse than the 0.5% that economists forecast. The decline was attributed to bad weather and shoppers moving to online retailers, which meant 27.4% of retail sales took place online. That's the highest since February 2022. Well, GB News can reveal that almost 25,000 asylum seekers have crossed the English Channel since Rishi Sunak became Prime Minister. 24,860 migrants in small boats have made the crossing since October last year. That means 1 in 4 crossings since 2017 have happened whilst Mr Sunak has been in number 10. Stopping the boats is one of the government's 5 priorities. All GP surgeries in England are to move to a digital phone system, potentially ending what the Health Secretary has called the 8 a.m. scramble for appointments. The switch is backed by a £240 million investment from the government as part of its primary care recovery plan. It's hoped it will allow patients to contact their GP faster and have their request dealt with on the day, rather than having to call back. There have been over 100 sewage leaks in government departmental buildings in the last year. Government building locations had 138 sewage leaks across the country in a 12-month period. The Ministry of Defence had the most, with 102 sewage leaks, including at RAF bases such as Coldrose and RAF Henlow. Liberal Democrat Christine Jardine says the party have been urging the government to fix sewage leaks along the coast for months.
Water companies are making profits, they are paying vast bonuses, and yet families are afraid to go swimming in the sea, as I said, this summer. The first summer where they've been completely free to feel that they could go on holiday. And we've had quite good weather some of the time, and not able to make the most of it. And that's unacceptable. And now to see that people are also getting it in their workplace, we're not safe. That's simply not good enough. And the government needs to get to grips with this.
Police in the US state of Georgia are investigating threats made against members of the jury who voted to charge Donald Trump with trying to overturn the 2020 presidential election result. The names and addresses of grand jury members were posted online by Mr. Trump's supporters. The former president was indicted for a fourth time on Monday for a suspected scheme to try to keep him in power. He denies any wrongdoing and remains the front-runner to win the Republican presidential nomination for 2024. Michael Gove has written to councils across Britain to request that pubs can open early on Sunday for the World Cup final. Pub bosses have warned licensing rules mean some venues will be unable to serve pints or open early for excited fans on the day. England's women will play Spain at 11 a.m. in their first World Cup final after beating hosts Australia on Wednesday. An average of 4.6 million people tuned in to watch the Lionesses progress to their first ever World Cup final, the most watched game of the tournament. No surprises there. Well, this is GB News across the UK, on TV, in your car, on digital radio, and of course on your smart speaker by saying, play GB News. Now, though, it's back to Tom and Emily.
Well, welcome back. This is Britain's Newsroom here on GB News. And I have to say, our inbox has already been deluged by all of your thoughts on this big question we've been asking. Should pubs potentially defy the law and open a little bit earlier? Susan has written in to say, if the police can turn a blind eye to shoplifting, they can bloomin' well turn a blind eye to the pub opening an hour early.
We'll drink to that.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll drink to that. Graham says, if Boris could issue orders in the pandemic, surely Rishi can issue an order to enjoy ourselves. Yes, we need an emergency law change there.
We do, but they passed the Coronavirus Powers Act. They had the MPs came in and they had to pass that emergency legislation. The problem is, all the MPs are on holiday. We're in recess.
You know, they started, making tweets here and there about takeaway pints at one point. You know, why not?
A lot of the provisions have been have expired, but when the Afghanistan crisis happened, MPs rushed back in August. Is this on the levels of that crisis?
I don't think so, Tom. I think that's a bit of a stretch.
Lorraine says no need to serve alcohol early, just be more family-friendly and serve coffee, tea and soft drinks. No need to get so sozzled so early.
Have you met Brits, though, Lorraine? I mean, the problem is, yes, we all do drink too much, on average, at least, but I'm not sure people go to the pub for coffee.
You can't have coffee and watch the football. Like, you can't be sitting there with your sort of your coffee cup and saucer and be cheery. It just doesn't work.
You know, I don't really like gender politics, but, you know, if it were the lads playing...
Would people be saying coffee?
Would people be saying, oh, no, coffee's fine?
Well, Peter has written in, with Parliament shut and the Prince of Wales not going to Australia, can the King not issue a proclamation to allow pubs to open early? Great PR for the monarchy. It would be great PR,
Well, they did give us a bank
sure.
holiday. The monarch has given us a bank holiday in the past, so this...
But the tiny tweak. It would need the consent of Parliament as well. Since what am I trying to say? Since 1688, we've had the sort of need for the monarch to sign off with Parliament and vice versa.
Yes.
I think we're getting into... I did want to just reference one email that has come in that, for some reason, our producers haven't printed out for us. But it says, Dear idiots, consider some other idiot will take you on, be arrested and taken to court. You're clever, intelligent and interesting and fun, and I couldn't believe how irresponsible you could be. Emily, what do you say to that? Christine says you're irresponsible.
She makes a good point. You know, we don't want landlords going to jail for this, but as Susan pointed out, the police do often turn a blind eye to what they call minor offences. So perhaps this would be... Although councils, to be fair, are usually the ones with the clipboards going around checking things.
Perhaps to end this conversation, it is interesting. In the last 24 hours, the Home Office has said they'll be writing to police chiefs, telling them to work with councils to ensure as many venues can open up as possible. So perhaps this actually does... perhaps the police will be turning a blind eye. It's an interesting question. No doubt lots more to get to on that.
Well, there you go.
Let's get to the bigger news now. This is Britain's Newsroom, after all, with me, Tom Harwood, and Emily Carver.
It is. So, GB News' Don't Kill Cash campaign was delivered right to the heart of government yesterday. A 5-strong GB News team took the 300,000-strong petition to the Chancellor's Downing Street residence yesterday.
And with the government already vowing action on banks who don't provide free cash access within 3 miles, we're joined by our economics and business editor for the latest on the campaign. Liam Halligan, thank you for joining us here in the studio. What exactly has the Treasury announced?
It's quite vague in terms of specifics, but it's quite strong on rhetoric, much as lots of political press releases are. Let's have a look at some of the words that the Treasury's used this morning. I've got them here in a graphic. The first thing that the Treasury says, which I must say I take some satisfaction in, given that the regulatory bodies have cast eyebrows in our direction when we launched this campaign, GB News has it spot on. Access to cash is incredibly important to many. It's a choice that we're going to protect, say the Treasury. People shouldn't have to trek for hours to withdraw a tenner to put in someone's birthday card, nor should businesses have to travel large distances to deposit cash takings. That's why we're acting now to protect access to cash in law and laying out that this means fee-free withdrawals and the availability of cash facilities within a reasonable distance. Now, that's a press release. What really matters is what makes it into regulations and even legislation, and then, even more important than that, is how that legislation and those regulations are imposed. Let me give you, of course, all that's unknowable at this point, but let me give you an example. One aspect of this campaign isn't just that, you know, well over 1 million households haven't got a bank account, 10% of households have no regular access to the internet, many elderly and vulnerable people need to use cash, many small businesses rely on using cash. All that's important. The big tech giants like us using cash, monitoring the way we behave online and so on, so they can then sell those patterns of behaviour to other companies. But an important aspect also that we've highlighted is that small businesses, small retailers, cab drivers, lots of people use payment companies to take card payments, right? The payment companies, they're only meant to charge between 0.5% and 1% on each transaction, right? Many of them are currently charging 3%, 4%, even 5%. And that's not right. And yet, it's not being enforced. The regulations are not being enforced. And that's with cash there as competition. If the cash wasn't there, what would these payment card companies charge?
That's a very interesting
And it's not just me saying that, it's the Federation of Small Businesses, which have also backed our campaign, who have made this point in conjunction with me repeatedly on GB News.
Well, I must say, you did a very good job with the blow-up pig there, making a massive statement by the
I thought I was on a Pink Floyd album cover.
It was really brilliant. Everyone looked very smart and did a fantastic job. But we've also got with us former city editor of The Telegraph, Neil Collins. Neil, is this something that your readers used to be very concerned about?
I think that cash is really important in society, for all sorts of reasons, not least of which is the fact that it belongs in the hands of the bearer. And this is something that we lose at our peril, because if we switch to entirely electronic transactions, then the ability of some malign future administration to make our lives a misery if we don't comply is much increased. I think it's absolutely vital we keep cash. And it seems to me the banks have been so cloth-eared about this. They didn't need to be told by the government. And indeed, if I was a real conspiracy theorist, I'd say probably they had agreed to do this quietly and said, well, you're the government, perhaps you'd better take credit for it. But really, it seems so obvious to me that you've got to allow people to have access to cash in a reasonable way.
Is it not the case that just sort of there are market imperatives here? It's cheaper for banks to close down sort of local branches. The majority, not all, but the majority of people will use banking services online. For many people, they find it more convenient to pay with a tap of the phone or a tap of the watch rather than getting out little coins. Isn't the reason why we've sort of been sleepwalking away from cash because many people find it more convenient to not use it?
Well, the answer to that, obviously, is yes. And there are many shops that don't take cash. And you can see why, because it makes their administrative lives a lot easier. But, you know, the banks have a different position in society. They are not just money-making machines, although that may be how they look to most people. You know, they do have substantial social responsibilities. And if they start walking away from those or trying to minimise them, then they will find themselves in serious difficulty because they are part of the social fabric.
Yeah, indeed. Now, Liam, there's been a bit of good economic news in the past week. Economic growth higher than expected, inflation down more than expected. But we've had some pretty bleak retail figures, haven't we, come out today?
Yeah, this is what happens when you raise interest rates 14 times in a row. Mortgage rates go up. A lot of households are really feeling the squeeze. It's incredible to me that retail sales, it's not that they're weak, that they've been as relatively strong as they have been. But with all respect, that's by the by. Let's just consider what's happened, right? The guy on the other side of the desk there, we've never worked together. OK, Neil Collins is a legend at The Telegraph. I've been writing columns at The Telegraph for many years. We've never actually worked together. I don't even know Neil. Obviously, I know his work, but I don't think we've ever met. He is probably the most respected financial journalist in Britain, among people who know, particularly when it comes to things like banking and the nitty-gritty of how the city works. He's a proper...
Only the best on Britain's Newsroom.
Well, it's not just that. It's not just that.
Liam, would you take a cheque?
As long as you make it out in cash.
This is an important moment, OK? This channel has been derided, right, by mainstream broadcasters. This channel is still looked at snootily by the media establishment in this country. We've just got a press release from the Treasury bigging us up, and we've just got Neil Collins in our studio saying, yeah, you guys are really onto something. I completely support what you're doing. That's a really big deal. Well, that's a really big deal.
Let's throw that back to Neil Collins, who's just been showered with praise, rightly so. I suppose this is a serious set of issues that we're looking at. The economic situation of this country is, many people would point to, not in the rosiest position.
I think that nobody would quarrel with that. I mean, to have a government which has simultaneously got the biggest budget deficit and the highest level of taxation and no growth, or almost zero growth, is quite an impressive trio of bad news. Yes, we're not in a great place. And I think that the UK economy is always full of surprises, one way or another. Somebody once likened it to the bumblebee, where the bumblebee, if you do the analysis of it, it can't possibly fly because it's just aerodynamically incompetent. But actually, it does. And there are many aspects of the UK economy where you think this is really bad and likely to get worse. But the official statistics don't measure everything. There's a lot going on under the sort of the surface of these day-to-day statistics of smaller businesses which are creating new areas of wealth, mostly connected to IT and that sort of thing. And there's a lot of small-scale entrepreneurs who are quietly doing rather well.
So perhaps today's numbers, retail sales down 1.2%, seems on the surface pretty bad news, but sort of beneath those numbers there is green shoots of growth.
Yeah, I would hate to use that. Use your cliches in rotation, I think is what I would say.
Light at the end of the tunnel?
Oh, no.
Oh, but it could be a train.
I mean, I don't think these figures are particularly meaningful. You know, it was filthy weather last month, so people stayed at home. A lot of the things that people buy, they don't have to buy them this week or this month, so they'll wait till the sun shines or they're feeling a bit better about life and then spend the money then. 1 month's figures in almost every aspect are capable of being completely misleading, and I would put those in that category.
I'm going to remember, take away that bumblebee analogy after this interview. Thank you very much, Neil Collins, former city editor at The Telegraph, and of course, our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan, with us. Thank you for your time.
Absolutely. Well, coming up, we're going to get stuck into some other thorny issues. Birth rates in the United Kingdom have hit their lowest point in 20 years. Should we be concerned? That's coming up after these messages.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Low pressure is arriving overnight, increasingly strong winds ahead of it, heavy rain as well, and the risk of thunderstorms, especially for eastern parts of England during the early hours of Saturday. Here's the low that's approaching, developing quickly. That's going to bring strengthening winds both ahead and during the period in which that low pressure crosses the UK. But before the low arrives, actually, showery rain pushes north, easing for a time, drier conditions for Scotland, northeast England and southern parts for a time. Some sunshine coming through, but a lot of cloud, and with the breeze as well, it's not going to feel particularly hot. 23, 24 Celsius, albeit with increased humidity. Then the low pushes in. Very strong winds developing across western parts. Gales through Irish Sea coast in particular, and West Wales at the southwest of England seeing the strongest winds during the evening. During the early hours, we're going to see thunderstorms develop across eastern parts of England, heavy rain pushing into Scotland and Northern Ireland, sweeping through elsewhere, and a very warm night to come, 17, 18 Celsius. So a blustery start to the weekend. The heavy and persistent rain pushes into Scotland, Northern Ireland and northwest England. For the rest of England and Wales, it's a mixture of sunny spells and showers. Most of the showers will be across western England and Wales. Drier and brighter for southeast England, and still warm, particularly where the sun is shining.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. And action.
Sergeant, read my superstar panel. They're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views, and often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It is 10:25 in the morning. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Tom Harwood and me, Emily Carver.
Now let's get into a thorny topic. NIMBY is a term that stands for not in my backyard. We often think of this as to do with housing, stopping housing development, but it can mean so much more as well. There are NIMBY campaigns that stop nuclear power stations. There are NIMBY campaigns that stop pylons being built. There are NIMBY campaigns that stop railways being delivered as well, and interconnectors.
Yes, and that leads us on nicely to our story here. In Portsmouth, a group of NIMBY campaigners have mobilised their elected representatives, including local MP Penny Mordaunt, to campaign against the Aquin interconnector, which some argue would be the most effective way to decarbonise Britain.
But what is an interconnector, and why are some in the local community so opposed to having this built? Well, here with us is the Public Relations Counsel to the Aquin interconnector and anti-NIMBY campaigner, Johnny Stoneborough. Johnny, thank you so much for joining us here in the studio. What is an interconnector?
An interconnector is just a cable. A thick cable that's going to come over from France and bring us unbelievable amounts of electricity.
And this particular interconnector would join Portsmouth
with France.
With France?
Yeah.
Anywhere in particular in France? Northern France,
Northern
presumably?
France, near Dieppe.
Okay.
And then it'll come in at Portsmouth when we get it built, and to a substation just behind Portsmouth.
And was it given the go-ahead and then NIMBYs got involved?
No, the NIMBY movement, and by the way, I think we're all NIMBYs up to a point. Nobody wants to have their house or whatever it is obstructed, or if they don't want a ditch in front of their house. I understand. And as you get older, odd enough, you become more NIMBY-ish.
Of course.
But that isn't really the point. The fact is that we have a small group of people in Portsmouth who are holding something up which is nationally important, very important. We need more electricity. We do not have enough electricity. Over the next 7 years, we have to treble the amount of electricity that's coming into this country or being made in this country from renewables. And we need to try everything. We've got to get started, and it's being held up.
What do you say to those who say that, yes, we need more energy in this country? That is very, very clear. But we need to generate it ourselves. We don't want to be importing it from foreign countries. We should be building the nuclear power stations here rather than using the French ones.
Yes, what if the French turned it off?
Well, it is a point that's made, but the fact is that even if we were to cover the land and the sea in propellers at the moment, we wouldn't have enough. There are also, and this is really important, there are also moments in the course of 24 hours where maybe there is no wind, and certainly at night you're not getting any solar. We have to bring what's called baseload into the country somehow. Now, we've switched off all the power stations, So where's it going to come from? And interconnectors actually perform that role. And every day we're importing around 15% from abroad.
Now, you said we need to treble our electricity
We do.
in just 6 years. Is that due to the move towards electric vehicles, electrification of rail?
Absolutely. If we want to meet our net zero targets, 2030, 2050, these are two really, really important dates that the whole country is being moved onto a totally different power base. I mean, it's an extraordinary endeavour and so important. Yes, we've got to get this interconnector built because it's ready to go. We're just waiting for the green light from the Secretary of State.
But there is a reason why the local MPs, both Labour and Conservative, are campaigning against this now. There is a group of concerned residents in Portsmouth who say they don't want a big trench dug through their lovely seafront. What do you say to them?
Temporary trench, yes. I mean, I absolutely get it. I know some of these people, Viola and Pam and Janet. They're known to me, and I absolutely respect their position. But the fact is, they're not actually. There's a guy called Wilhelm as well.
Wilhelm doesn't want us buying continental electricity.
Anyway, but I mean, these people are serious about what they're saying, and they're supported by their two local MPs and indeed by the council and the local newspaper, and they've got this campaign going. I believe that they're wrong, and if you give me half an hour, I can tell you in detail why I think they're wrong.
Unfortunately, we don't have half an hour. But this really is a story of our time, isn't it?
It is. Yeah.
When people want to construct something that might be useful to this country, there's always people, and usually quite a small group of people, who say, absolutely no way, not in my backyard. No, you can't have your interconnector that could deliver green electricity to our country.
Or I suppose, because it's an interconnect, it goes both ways, we could also sell electricity back to the French. We could make money from that.
There we go, money spinner.
But I suppose there are, whenever anyone wants to build, whether it's a cable or a power station, or even, dare I say it, a shale gas extraction plant, or even perhaps, I don't know, a migrant detention centre, nothing can be built because it's not in my backyard.
Well, if you're in Portsmouth at home, please do let us know what you think about this interconnector. Does it bother you, or do you think it's for the greater good?
Well, in just a moment, we'll be going over some more biggest stories of the day with our excellent news panel. So keep sending in your views, dbviews@gbnews.com. But now, let's get the latest news headlines.
It's 10:31. I'm Jeff Moody in the GB Newsroom. Cash will remain accessible as part of a new plan set out by the Treasury. It comes after the GB News Don't Kill Cash petition, which attracted nearly 300,000 signatures, was delivered to Downing Street yesterday. A new framework will ensure that the vast majority of people will be no further than 3 miles away from being able to withdraw cash. And the Financial Conduct Authority will be given new powers to protect the provision of cash services. Sales in the retail sector fell faster than expected last month, the Office for National Statistics has reported. Retail sales fell by 1.2% in July. That's worse than the 0.5% that economists forecast. The decline was attributed to bad weather and shoppers moving to online retailers. GB News can reveal that almost 25,000 asylum seekers have crossed the English Channel since Rishi Sunak became Prime Minister. 24,971 migrants in small boats have made the crossing since October last year. That means 1 in 4 crossings since 2017 have happened whilst Mr Sunak has been in number 10. All GP surgeries in England are to move to a digital phone system, potentially ending what the Health Secretary has called the 8 a.m. scramble for appointments. The switch is backed by a £240 million investment from the government as part of its primary care recovery plan. It's hoped it will allow patients to contact their GP faster. Well, you can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website. That's gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2716 and €1.1704. The price of gold is £1,487.80 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 7,261 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News, investments that matter.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nah, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
Is the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 10:38 and you're with Britain's Newsroom here on GB News with me, Tom Harwood, and Emily Carver. And again, so many of you have been getting in touch.
Yeah, people are a little bit annoyed, Tom, about the talk of a French interconnector.
Yes, I wonder if it's just the fact that there's the word French in it that's got people...
Quite possibly. Stephen says, we do not need an interconnector from France or any other foreign country to supply electricity to this country. We should, without doubt, be supplying our own, whether that be oil or fracking, until we have nuclear power stations. Your guest is totally wrong. Yes, we should be supplying our own electricity, but sometimes you need a helping hand.
Well, yeah, while we build the nuclear power stations, what do we do? And also, I think the other thing that we perhaps didn't touch on too much in that conversation, we just did right at the end, was we can use the connector to sell energy back to France. once we have loads of nuclear power stations or whatever else, and we've got excess power, it could be a money-making
But
scheme.
some people are worried that the French authorities might turn off the interconnector. Wasn't there a threat of something similar not too long ago?
There was some sort of... the French always...
Remind us at home, if you remember what it was. The French did say they were going to cut off our power or something. Perhaps it was Jersey.
Pauline has written in to say these interconnectors aren't just a trench in the ground, not just a cable. They have buildings as well, what Pauline describes as massive buildings. She lives near IFA2, which is a monstrosity in her words.
Oh, so was our guest Johnny maybe downplaying the infrastructure
I suppose it depends where the building goes. If you have a long cable and then there's a building sort of in the middle of nowhere, is that an issue?
Is that a problem?
Yeah.
Let us know what you think. A lot of people have been turned off by the word French, I think.
But of course, the big question we've been asking is about pubs. Should pubs open early on Sunday? There's a lot of legal difficulty here. In my view, pubs should be able to open whenever they want, but sadly that's not the system we live under.
John says the law is the law. Once it's allowed that laws don't apply when it's convenient to ignore them, the law becomes meaningless. Take that, Tom.
No, I mean, it's a fair point. Jamie has written in to say, I love beer and pubs, but to open at 11 for a match is just ridiculous. 12 o'clock should be half-time, so tea and bacon sarnies during the first half and beers in the second.
Well, I think we were actually saying 10 a.m, not just 11 a.m,
Well,
10 a.m.
If I had my way, they'd be able to open from whenever they want.
We will move on in a second, but I just have to read this one out because Paul says, can you imagine if everyone threw their coffee in the air when we score? There'll be a lot of people needing help for birds. Yes, a beer being thrown all over you is not as much of a safety risk.
If we were just doing tea and coffee, we'd be willing the Lionesses don't score until the second half of the game.
You are funny at home. I really do enjoy these emails that come through.
We will get to more on this a little bit later with our panel, because a little birdie tells me that one Mr. Nigel Farage has weighed in on this debate, so stick around for what he has to say. But
yes, perhaps he might change your mind.
But before we get to that, we are going to cover on a story that's actually popped up in a lot of the papers this morning. Quite a concerning story. And that is data published by the Office for National Statistics has revealed that the number of babies born in England and Wales has dropped to the lowest total in over 20 years.
Yes, the stats also show that 30.3% of babies were born to non-UK mothers, foreign-born mothers. India, Pakistan, Romania, they're the top nationalities.
So what should we make of this? Well, we're joined now by the statistician and former ONS analyst, Jamie Jenkins. Jamie, thanks for making the time this morning. I suppose this is actually following a long-term trend. We haven't been at replacement birth rates since around the 1960s.
Yeah, good morning, guys. So I think what's the kind of consequences of these numbers? You're right, they're following a longer-term trend than what we're seeing. And if you look at other statistics that we see, so house prices is a good place to start, because what you tend to be finding now is more children are living longer with their parents because they can't move out of kind of the family home to kind of start a family themselves. So that kind of delays some of the kind of childs that would be born in the country. And if you look at 1997, the ratio of, say, the average house price to kind of earnings was about 3.5 in 1997. And in 2022, it's up to 8.2. So it's much, much less affordable now for people to get on the housing ladder. What that means is people have to save up longer, they're working longer, you know, women are kind of delaying having those children until kind of later in life, which means they tend to have fewer children. So you're right to point out, Tom, that the replacement fertility rate is 2.1. So you need basically 2.1 children for every couple to replace the kind of the population. But that's been down, it's running at about 1.6 in the country. And it does have long-term implications of this, because if you think in 20 years' time, if you're getting fewer births now, you've got fewer people entering the labour force. And it's kind of why we've been seeing high levels of immigration in the country over recent years, is because the people have often been coming through because of fewer births over successive decades, and we need people to come in to do the jobs.
More babies than the British population when they come here. A record proportion of babies whose mothers were born outside the UK. So Brits aren't having babies, but those who have moved to this country are having no problem.
No, well, you've got to kind of look at the differences in terms of what we've got here. So you're right, 30.3% of people born kind of to mothers who were kind of born abroad overall. And it's coming to say India, Pakistan, Romania are kind of the top ones there. And it may be to do with the fact that fewer of these people are in the labour market. They may have their partners in the labour market. So there are a number of different dynamics at play there.
Yeah, that's very interesting indeed. Now, I saw in the Telegraph today something that shocked me, although we do hear it quite a lot. A certain professor, her name escapes me at this moment, but she's from Oxford University, I believe, has said falling birth rates in the West are a good thing for the world because we're high consuming. What do you make of that kind of narrative?
Well, absolutely bonkers. You know, it's all bringing everything back to this kind of net zero nonsense that's talked by a lot of people. You know, if we look at the United Kingdom, 1% of all the CO2 emissions in the United Kingdom from our global emissions. And ultimately, it's probably not just the kind of the number of births you see. And one of the things you can clearly relate to when you're looking at this data is, you know, the richest people. I think the individual there was talking about rich countries, but it's the richest people on the planet all over who kind of preach about, you know, we need to get down to net zero, who are the biggest polluters when you look at carbon emissions. So, you know, China continuing with the emissions at their kind of population, I think a bit further away from the mark in terms of the comments there.
Well, Jamie Jenkins, former ONS statistician, thank you so much for talking us through that issue there.
And I must just quickly say it was a Professor Sarah Harper, CBE, who said falling birth rates in the West are good for our planet because essentially we're the nasty ones who use too much energy.
I seem to remember that we're the fastest decarbonising G20 economy, but let's bring in our...
Not hit them with the facts there.
let's bring in our panel now for a broader range of views on all of these topics. The journalist and political commentator Chloe Dobbs is with us, alongside the former deputy leader of the Green Party, Sharar Ali. And Sharar, let's get your thoughts firstly on what we were just discussing with Jamie Jenkins there. The birth rate is falling. Should we be concerned about that?
Well, firstly, I was quite impressed for a former ONS employee for him to be quite so politicised, which is of interest. I think my first response was, well, so what? I mean, we've got statistics here which tell us where people were originally born, the mothers. It doesn't tell us even whether they're British or not. So I think we need to avoid that conflation.
It's interesting, though, to look at who is having children.
It is, yes. In terms of the upside, I do think there is a case to say that because we are a very high-consuming country, that a reduction in population could help us. And it can just help us just in terms of waiting lists at GPs, you know, the fact that there's a lot of overcrowding in our cities. You know, it could become a more habitable place.
I suppose that would be true if it was across the board, but if there's fewer young people and we've got an ageing population,
absolutely, yeah.
More old people, it doesn't sound like waiting lists would come down.
There's still a lot of procreation taking place, right? People are actually exercising their liberty to procreate. It's very difficult for anybody to plan population. And as soon as you start doing that, you're going to be accused of being authoritarian. You know, you could have a child policy of a certain number. So that's going to be difficult. And I'm not sure that the replacement rate is a non-arbitrary figure
but hang
to go
on,
for.
Shara, presumably you'd be in favour of having a liberal immigration system, though?
More liberal than most parties, absolutely, yeah.
So, how do you square that circle?
Well, you square it insofar as that we've got a very internationalised population, right? So 2/3 of those mothers who are from outside the UK, born outside the UK, were giving birth in London. So, of course, we know London, extremely multicultural, diverse population. Afghanistan also appeared as a high birth nation, partly because of the fact that we were, rightly so, opening our country to people who are fleeing from a war-torn part of the world. So I do think that, you know, what's of interest here is to see that people from all nationalities in our country feel able to integrate and are welcome here.
Well, let's throw this now to Chloe Dobbs, the journalist and commentator. Chloe, what do you make of this? Should we be concerned about this decline in birth rate?
I don't think that we should be overly concerned. I think that we should be concerned in that house prices are so high now. We have such a housing shortage that, you know, for me, I don't think that I would be able to afford a house without being on a mega salary. That is enough to house not just myself, but also kids as well. So that is a concern. But I don't think it's concerning if women feel that they have the freedom to choose to focus on their career rather than have a child. I personally am not interested in having a child.
But hang on. We're not sure about what is the driving factor here. As you say, it could be high house prices. People can't have the spare room for the child. People might be sharing with a huge number of other people and might not feel comfortable in terms of bringing a date home or whatever. They might be living with their parents. But similarly, it might be personal choice here. And I suppose we don't know what the answer is.
Yeah, I think we'll have to wait and see if more information comes about, maybe some polling that would suggest why people aren't having as many children. That would shed much more light on it. Also, as well as house prices, it's so hard to survive as a family on a single income. And I think if I were to become a mother, I would want to be able to put the time in to stay at home and look after my children properly, rather than having to ship them off to childcare whilst I slave away at work.
I suppose it's no coincidence that these numbers are coming amidst a cost of living crisis.
I just think it's such a shame, because I think for a lot of young women, they may not want children in their 20s, they may not want children in their early 30s, and then sometimes it gets too late.
Well, there are more questions to ask and more stories to discuss, because I believe we have video now of what Mr Nigel Farage has said about our big question of the day, which is, should pubs open? Can we have a listen to what he's had to say?
So it's the big women's final on Sunday, and the pubs are not going to be serving till midday. It's not good enough with an earlier kick-off. Government can't deal with it, but we all pay a huge amount of council tax to our local authorities. So, guys and girls, pull your fingers out, get the pubs open.
Sharad, what do you make of that?
Well, I think one neat solution, which I haven't heard suggested yet, is we just delay the start of the match on the other side of the world. We'll have to check Prince William's diary first, of course, although he seems to be a bit reluctant to go as well. I mean, we can't change the law sort of on an arbitrary basis. There was a law. Some, pub owners have actually met the deadline. So to some extent, it is possible. Parliament is in recess. It's going to be very difficult then to achieve.
The Liberal Democrats have called for Parliament to return to liberalise this one issue. Do you agree?
If there's sufficient motivation to do it, that would be. I'm sure it would be only partial attendance, but that's what it required. There has to be a process, and that would be the way to go.
It's so funny how they all think this is a vote winner.
One thing I would say is this just shows the incompetency of local councils. This is a huge moment in British history to be at the World Cup final in, how many years is it? A long time. Local councils are just saying, oh, we don't have time to process the paperwork to give you all licences to open earlier. What I say to the businesses is, put the application in, and if the council doesn't approve it, just go for it. You have safety in numbers. If every pub does it, what are they going to do?
Well, it is interesting looking at what apparently Michael Gove has written to... Or no, who was it? Was it the Home Secretary?
Michael Gove. It's Michael Gove.
It was Michael Gove.
Councils, yeah.
And the Home Office has written to police chiefs asking them to work with councils. Now, to me, that might be, I don't know, is that a sort of nod and a wink to say that pubs should just open anyway?
Well, I think what Michael Gove is saying is Parliament is not going to come back together and pass a blanket law to change the rules for the rest of the country. So local councils need to get their act together to pass individual licensing changes. He's not saying act legally. He's saying, you local councils, you need to get your act together and give the permissions for each individual pub in your area.
Shahar, where will you be watching the game?
I haven't decided yet.
If you will be.
If you will be.
It's well worth doing, and I just think it's a fantastic opportunity for everybody.
And Chloe, will you be in a pub?
I think I probably will be. I haven't made plans yet, but I'm sure once I hear all the roars coming from the street, I'll have to head down and see what's going on.
May I just say one thing? Because I feel a bit bad. Earlier in the week, I was on the breakfast show reviewing the papers, and I was a bit miserable. I suggested that maybe people aren't that excited about the football and maybe a bit of
Have you changed your mind?
And I just feel bad about myself because I was a bit of a misery, and I know some people commented that I was being, rude. So I apologise, and I will be watching the football.
Have you changed your mind then? Do you think it is?
I have. It's nice.
Yeah,
it's nice.
Yeah.
It's nice.
Do you know what? I'm not a massive football fan, but whenever there is a Euros final, or what was it, the semi-final last time, whenever there is a World Cup, I do get excited. I think there's that sort of national spirit thing in a way. I can get excited about England in a way I can't get excited about Chelsea.
And whether it's tea, coffee, or a pint of beer, or a rosé, in my case, please do celebrate.
Absolutely. Well, Chloe Dobbs and Shahar Ali, thank you so much for seeing us. We'll see you later for more stories, and big stories at that. You're watching Britain's Newsroom here on GB News. And remember, on all of the stories that we're talking about, please do get in touch, because we do love seeing your views. And indeed, On that issue of migrants that opened the show, Rod has written in to say Border Force was supposed to protect our borders from anyone trying to enter illegally. Why have they become the opposite and are now a taxi service? Well, it's a question that many people are asking.
It is a question that a lot of people are asking. I think Anne Widdecombe probably was asking that question too, if I remember rightly. Very forthright, wasn't she? Good interview, though. I thought.
Absolutely. And indeed, Robert has written in to say Border Force are supposed to protect our borders from anyone trying to enter illegally. Why and how have they become the opposite? That is pretty much exactly what Rod had said. So Rod and Robert, you're in agreement. We'll get more on this coming up after these messages.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Low pressure is arriving overnight, increasingly strong winds ahead of it, heavy rain as well, and the risk of thunderstorms, especially for eastern parts of England during the early hours of Saturday. Here's the low that's approaching, developing quickly. That's going to bring strengthening winds both ahead and during the period in which that low pressure crosses the UK. But before the low arrives, actually, showery rain pushes north, easing for a time, drier conditions for Scotland, northeast England and southern parts for a time. Some sunshine coming through, but a lot of cloud, and with the breeze as well, it's not going to feel particularly hot. 23, 24 Celsius, albeit with increased humidity. Then the low pushes in. Very strong winds developing across western parts. Gales through Irish Sea coast in particular, and West Wales at the southwest of England seeing the strongest winds during the evening. During the early hours, we're going to see thunderstorms develop across eastern parts of England, heavy rain pushing into Scotland and Northern Ireland, sweeping through elsewhere, and a very warm night to come, 17, 18 Celsius. So a blustery start to the weekend. The heavy and persistent rain pushes into Scotland, Northern Ireland and northwest England. For the rest of England and Wales, it's a mixture of sunny spells and showers. Most of the showers will be across western England and Wales. Drier and brighter for southeast England, and still warm, particularly where the sun is shining.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my new show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m, where real...
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
Please stop. Should I just shut up? Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody. Adventure. Etc.
That's the whole point. But
And action.
Sergeant Reed, my superstar panel, they're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views, and often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom with me, Tom Harwood, and Emily Carver. It is just gone 11 o'clock.
It has indeed now a victory for cash, a GB News victory. The government has officially endorsed GB News' Don't Kill Cash campaign. But what do the great British public think of the prospect of a cashless society? We'll find out from Jack Carson, our reporter.
GP gridlock. The government is pledging to end the 8 a.m. scramble and make it far easier to get a GP appointment. But do GPs really think it can be done? We'll speak to the renowned Dr. Lawrence Gurlis to find out.
And should your local pub defy the law and open at 10 a.m. on the day of the World Cup final?
Can we be more creative and find a way to sort of have the government allow this, but without that vote in Parliament that is currently in recess? It's a nightmare. gbviews@gbnews.com is the address to get in touch with your thoughts. How do we solve the pub conundrum? But of course, we're getting to all of that after your morning news with Jeff Moody.
Good morning, it's 1 minute past 11. I'm Jeff Moody in the GB Newsroom. Train drivers will strike on the 1st of September and overtime will be banned the day after in a long-running dispute over pay. The strike will force train companies across England to cancel all services, while the ban on overtime will seriously disrupt the network. It will be the 12th one-day strike by ASLEF members since the dispute started over a year ago. Police in Northern Ireland have arrested a man in connection to the PSNI data breach. A 50-year-old man has been detained in County Londonderry under the Terrorism Act and is being questioned. Another man was arrested yesterday on suspicion of collecting information likely to be useful to terrorists. Last week, the details of 10,000 police officers and staff were published online by mistake, followed by a second breach relating to stolen documents and a laptop. Cash will remain accessible as part of a new plan set out by the Treasury. It comes after the GB News Don't Kill Cash petition, which attracted nearly 300,000 signatures, was delivered to Downing Street yesterday. A new framework will ensure that the vast majority of people will be no further than 3 miles away from being able to withdraw cash. Well, the Economic Secretary to the Treasury, Andrew Griffiths, says it's good for vulnerable people.
Cash is important. It's here to stay for the long term. Many people, the elderly, the vulnerable, particularly rural communities, do depend on that access to cash. And if we want our shops to continue to take cash over the counter, then of course those businesses have got to have somewhere to deposit it. So the rules that we're announcing also cover the ability of businesses to deposit cash in a location that's convenient to them.
Well, the Shadow Schools Minister, Stephen Morgan, says he's pleased the government are protecting vulnerable people.
Thank you for running the petition, because I know it's the poorest in society that don't always get access to cash, and certainly in Portsmouth, where I represent, people have really struggled where banks have closed and cash machines have charged people. So I think it's a really important campaign, and I'm really pleased the government have listened.
Sales in the retail sector fell faster than expected last month. That's according to the Office for National Statistics. Retail sales fell by 1.2% in July. That's worse than the 0.5% that economists forecast. The decline was attributed to bad weather and shoppers moving to online retailers, which meant 27.4% of retail sales took place online. That's the highest since February 22. GB News can reveal that almost 25,000 asylum seekers have crossed the English Channel since Rishi Sunak became Prime Minister. 24,971 migrants in small boats have made the crossing since October last year. That means 1 in 4 crossings since 2017 have happened whilst Mr Sunak has been in number 10. Stopping the boats is one of the government's 5 priorities. All GP surgeries in England are to move to a digital phone system, potentially ending what the Health Secretary has called the 8 a.m. scramble for appointments. The switch is backed by a £240 million investment from the government and hopes to connect patients with their GP faster. Now, police in the US state of Georgia are investigating threats made against members of the jury who voted to charge Donald Trump with trying to overturn the 2020 presidential election result. The names and addresses of grand jury members were posted online by Mr Trump's supporters. The former president was indicted for a 4th time on Monday for a suspected scheme to try to keep him in power. He denies any wrongdoing and remains the front runner to win the Republican presidential nomination for 2024. Now, Michael Gove has written to councils across Britain to request that pubs can open early on Sunday for the World Cup final. Pub bosses have warned licensing rules mean some venues will be unable to serve pints or open early for excited fans on the day. Foreign Secretary James Cleverly and Culture, Media and Sport Secretary Lucy Fraser will be representing the country at the match against Spain on Sunday. Now, the south of England could see more than a month's worth of rainfall today, the Met Office has warned. It's issued yellow weather warnings for thunderstorms in London and southern and eastern England and across the Midlands. Storms could lead to some travel disruption, power cuts and minor flooding. Well, this is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car on digital radio and, of course, on your smart speaker by saying, play GB News. Now, it's time to go back to Tom and Emily.
Well, welcome back to Britain's Newsroom. My name's Tom Harwood and I'm with Emily Carver. And I have to say that the inbox is overflowing with your thoughts.
There's a flood.
There is. I mean, like, look, there's so much paper on the desk. Should we get to this big question of the day?
May I just say, you know, we've been talking about opening the pubs early for the final and that people should be able to get a pint or a glass of wine or whatever. A lot of you don't agree. And you think it's actually a ludicrous suggestion. Dave said, and I think this is a bit of a joke, a bit tongue-in-cheek, in 1986 I played in goal for the Kendry Hotel in a cup final against the Yorkshire Traction. We won, I even saved a penalty. The pubs didn't open early, and let's face it, games don't come much bigger than that. Well, there you go. Just because the pubs didn't open early for you doesn't mean they shouldn't open early for the Lionesses.
No, I do agree. What is the Kendry Hotel? Yeah, no, as big as the England team, absolutely. No, you're quite right. I withdraw all of my... No, I don't. Margaret has written in saying it's only an hour. They shouldn't open early. But it's a crucial hour. It's the first hour of the game.
I think the problem is also that there'll be massive queues at the bar when at a crucial point in the match. And that's an issue, isn't it, if you can only get your drinks later on?
It's almost as if we shouldn't have these sort of blanket rules that sort of aren't malleable to circumstance. It's almost as if we've got sort of too much government in this country, too much prescriptive government and not enough liberty.
Well, there you go. Let us know what you think. But a lot of you do actually think that it is right that the pubs stay closed.
You're all authoritarians.
And that people shouldn't be drinking that early in the morning, Tom.
Yeah, no, that is true. That is true. We did have a view, and I've lost it now, but someone was saying sort of...
Nothing wrong with a Bucks Fizz, though, at that time.
Someone was saying people would be stumbling around outside. It would be the pub's fault. We'd have all of these drunkards. And it's just my response to that would be, if someone really wants to be stumbling around outside drunk, I don't think they'd go to a pub to do it. They'd get a bottle of spirit from off licence and drink it elsewhere.
Also, if I remember rightly from the last time I was at Wetherspoons in the morning, you can get a pint very early indeed.
You can.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I suppose it is a mix. I wonder actually if this is a small business point, that the big businesses have all the sort of know how to get all the licences, and it's the small local pubs that are suffering here.
Well, that's enough of that. Let's move on. What are we moving on to? Don't Kill Cash campaign.
Yeah.
A victory for GB News. The government is now taking action, and we're going to talk to Jack Carson, who's been talking to the great British public, as I understand it. Jack. Hello, who have you been talking to?
Good afternoon. Well, good. Yeah, good morning to you both. I've been here on the high streets of Birmingham talking to people this morning, finding out, of course, what they make of this decision from the Treasury to, allow the powers of the Financial Conduct Authority to, of course, possibly impose fines on banks if they don't, of course, secure that access to cash. The big plans from the government to secure cash going into the future, making sure that no person or business is less than 3 miles away from a cash point. I've been speaking to people about what they possibly make of the idea of a cashless society, and here's what they told me.
I think it's a good idea. I think there will always be a place for cash. I mean, for instance, there's elderly people who don't really have access to the internet, don't really know how to use mobile phones.
I only use contactless on my phone nowadays. I never take cash out at all because it's so much easier.
Well, it's actually phone now. There's no card at all. I don't even use cash. I haven't used cash for probably over 6 months, and everything's actually just all pinged with my phone. It's totally convenience. It's just go along to a shop and just get your phone out and just ping and it's away you go. I don't have to go to a cash point. I don't have to worry about any card theft or anything like that. So it just it's totally convenience.
Yeah, that point of convenience, certainly something that's been emphasised to me today, particularly by younger people. I think that's probably to be expected in a city like Birmingham, which is the youngest in the UK. That convenience, the fact that on most phones now, which of course the younger generation use, it's just a double tap of the screen and you can get that debit card up. But of course, it's that feeling of the fact you've got to support everyone in society, that older generation as well, that do use cash more often. The Unite Union estimate that since 2015, 6,000 branches of banks across the UK have closed, making that access to banking a little bit more harder than usual, of course. And while the younger generation, particularly here in Birmingham, might well be well versed in online banking, that's not necessarily the situation for everyone. So the feeling that actually, yes, maybe people here don't necessarily use cash all the time, but the fact that the Treasury are protecting that is something that's gone down well here in Birmingham.
Gone down well despite the tricky weather that you've been out this morning. I'm amazed that there have been people who've stopped to talk to you with their umbrellas and their coats. But Jack, while we have you, we've been talking about the football today, and we've been talking about whether people are going to watch it in a pub, what's going to go. What are your plans for Sunday?
Well, I'm going home this weekend, back to Mum and Dad, so I'm hoping that we'll get a few drinks in the fridge maybe and watch it nice and on the sofa. But of course, if there is a pub around and the pubs are allowed to open, that is a tempting offer.
Well, Jack, I do remember from the weekend what a fantastic football pundit you are. So, you might be there doing it for your family or doing it for us anyway. That's a nice compliment to you.
Yeah, well, Jack, thanks very much for joining us there from Birmingham with the latest on the Don't Kill Cash campaign and a bit of sport too.
Thrown in.
It's interesting, the Don't Kill Cash campaign, because I do see the both sides of it. People do find it a lot more convenient to use. I pay for things on my watch all the time, but I suppose that's the reason that the campaign is necessary, right? Because it's so convenient for some people to do it, the sort of cash gets pushed to the side.
Yes, I'm more convinced by the idea that, there is a danger for an authoritarian government in the future to use all our, take away our freedoms.
Take away social credit and tax us directly from our bank accounts, take money out if we've been naughty. Rather than appealing a speeding fine will no longer be a thing. They'll just take the money straight out of your account.
Well, exactly. But let's move on, because the Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, has pledged to end the 8 a.m. scramble for GP appointments. We've heard this before, haven't we?
We've heard it about 3 times from the government.
We have, but they're going to be providing £240 million in funding to help surgeries replace old phone systems with modern tech and ensure patients are seen faster.
But Labour are saying the struggle in getting an appointment just stems from government cuts. I'm not sure which government cuts they're talking about because, of course, the NHS budget has grown. But
it was always ring-fenced.
We'll perhaps dive more into the detail with that. That slightly has confused me. The NHS, it's about 40 billion more going into the NHS now than it was in 2010.
Yes, there actually have never been cuts.
No. Well, in Wales they have. Maybe they're talking about Wales, where, of course, who's in charge of the NHS in Wales?
Might be the Labour Party, but anyway.
Let's get back to the point in hand. Joining us now is the GP from Same Day Doctor, Dr. Lawrence Gurlis. And Dr. Lawrence, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Am I having a bout of amnesia right now, or has the government not announced this before?
Well, this has been a problem for a long time. I remember a televised debate during one of Tony Blair's elections where a woman pointed out that you have to get on the phone to your GP at 8 a.m, you get an engaged tone for about 45 minutes, and then when you eventually get through, all the appointments have gone. And the then Prime Minister, Labour Prime Minister, was totally gobsmacked, had no idea this was going on. So this problem's 15 or 20 years in the making, and nothing has been done. And actually, it's a disgrace that some practices do this well and others don't. And all of them should have put in digital phone systems themselves, using their practice expense far before this. It's a disgrace in a civilised country that people should be asked to get on the phone. What happens is GPs have a limited number of same-day appointments available. Those go very quickly. And then when you do get through, you can't get an appointment on the day, and you're not allowed. And this is another issue. You're not allowed to book more than 2 weeks in advance because that breaks another target. So the whole system is ruined by targets, ruined by the system. And the main problem being that demand has gone up and the number of GPs has gone down. And that really is the issue that's not going to be solved by a new phone system.
Now, Lawrence, you work for a private GP provider. What are they doing? What are they doing that some NHS practices aren't? Because, as you say, why aren't these modern phone systems already in place? It is 2023.
Yeah, I mean, most of our appointments we make by email, and the same is partly true on the NHS. What happens on the NHS is you have to put your details in and they'll decide whether it's urgent or not. But we make appointments by email. And the other thing we do is we have staff who work in the evenings and early mornings and weekends dealing with emails. I know many GP practices will use email, but they say, and this is again bizarre in this modern age, they say the email system only works when we're open. Well, that's a bit of a nonsense, isn't it? If you're a working person, you come home, you want to send off an email to your GP, you can't do that with many GP email systems. So we use email a lot. We have a phone system with enough people to answer it, so you'll get through within 2 or 3 rings. But then, of course, being in the private practice, we've demonstrated that using relatively modest fees will act as a queue jumping system, and a disincentive to waste the GP's time. A lot of calls to the GP are still wasted. A lot of demand on the GP has gone up inappropriately, and that's why they're under so much pressure.
It is fascinating because the NHS is becoming, I think, a bigger and bigger issue in electoral terms. People are thinking this is something that just isn't working in the way perhaps it used to. And yet when we look at the amount of money that is being spent on the system, it's more. I said in the introduction it was 40 billion a year more than in 2010. I was wrong. It's over 60 billion more every single year in inflation-adjusted terms than we were spending 13 years ago. That's an increase of around 40% in the budget. Where's all that money going?
There's a huge amount of regulation. We're all over-regulated. Even myself, in private practice, we're regulated by the Care Quality Commission, by NHS England. We have appraisals. We are regulated by the General Medical Council. If you multiply that by all the professional groups, and then every hospital, every GP will have its own internal systems, there's a huge waste in administration, in regulation. It's a hugely inefficient system. Nigel Lawson once said that the NHS is a national religion, but it is also unreformable. And that's the problem. It's so huge, and it's so unintegrated. It's like a rusty old machine. You can't do anything with it. And that's really where the money is being wasted. You have also got to say that demand has gone up. NHS general practice survived when the average person consulted their GP 3 times a year. That number for the average person, Tom and Emily, is now 9 times per year, average. So you can imagine there are some people that are going every week to the GP. And I spoke to a GP yesterday who says, we're still the first port of call for all the social and financial problems that the general public have, especially during the cost of living crisis. Those are his words, not mine. And I'm afraid...
Oh, sorry, I was just going to say how interesting that is.
Yeah, but you don't forget with the collapse in sort of religious culture, people not using the church or whatever, the GP is the person now in the community that people can go to and talk about their issues, whether they're personal, financial, social, housing or otherwise, and they do. And I've had GPs say to me, my problem is I look at my list every morning, I know every single patient on that list, and I know what they're coming in with. And you see, that blocks up the system. The system is just overused, too much demand, a lot of inappropriate demand, and we need to address that before we can solve any of these problems.
Lawrence Gurlis there, a GP from Same Day Doctor. It's quite interesting what he said about it
People
being
go for financial advice. Why would you go to a doctor for financial advice?
Because it's a trusted person, isn't it?
There are so many trusted people, or maybe there aren't.
Maybe there aren't. Think about it. The high street's dead. You can't get through to a normal person
You don't believe
on
your
the phone,
MP.
can you? You can't see your MP. But, I mean, if you manage to get an appointment with a GP, that's a tricky task. But up to 40%...
Please don't go and see your GP about financial... Go to Citizens Advice. Go to... Oh.
But it has a big, bearing on your health sometimes too, doesn't it? At least mental health.
Well, coming up, there's been lots more controversy around rumours that the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed MBS, as he's known, should he be coming to the United Kingdom, and should we be engaging with these sorts of countries? Lots more to discuss after this.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Low pressure is arriving overnight, increasingly strong winds ahead of it, heavy rain as well, and the risk of thunderstorms, especially for eastern parts of England during the early hours of Saturday. Here's the low that's approaching, developing quickly. That's going to bring strengthening winds both ahead and during the period in which that low pressure crosses the UK. But before the low arrives, actually, showery rain pushes north, easing for a time, drier conditions for Scotland, northeast England and southern parts for a time. Some sunshine coming through, but a lot of cloud, and with the breeze as well, it's not going to feel particularly hot. 23, 24 Celsius, albeit with increased humidity. Then the low pushes in. Very strong winds developing across western parts. Gales through Irish Sea coast in particular, and West Wales at the southwest of England seeing the strongest winds during the evening. During the early hours, we're going to see thunderstorms develop across eastern parts of England, heavy rain pushing into Scotland and Northern Ireland, sweeping through elsewhere, and a very warm night to come, 17, 18 Celsius. So a blustery start to the weekend. The heavy and persistent rain pushes into Scotland, Northern Ireland and northwest England. For the rest of England and Wales, it's a mixture of sunny spells and showers. Most of the showers will be across western England and Wales. Drier and brighter for southeast England, and still warm, particularly where the sun is shining.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we
get out of it. Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom. Now, we teased this just before the break. The big story developing about whether or not the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia should visit Britain. Our political correspondent, Catherine Forster, is with us in the studio for more.
Well, whether he should visit is an interesting question, but it sounds very likely that he will be visiting, possibly in October. Now, the Prime Minister had a telephone conversation with him yesterday talking about increased trade, defence, security cooperation, and would like him to visit at the earliest opportunity. Likely, given he is the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, that he will also meet the King and the red carpet will be rolled out. Now, the reason, of course, this is so controversial is he hasn't been here since the murder of Jamal Khashoggi.
The journalist.
The journalist. If you remember, it was quite horrific, wasn't he? This is a man who was a very vocal critic of the regime in Saudi Arabia. He had put himself into exile. He'd gone to the Saudi consulate in Istanbul to pick up documents for him to marry his fiancée. He never emerged. There was a 15-man hit squad, it later transpired, sent by Saudi Arabia to bring him back. He resisted arrest. He was suffocated, dismembered, taken out in suitcases, bits of his body. His body has never been recovered. And US intelligence says that they have definitive evidence that this hit, this assassination, was ordered by the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia.
But Mohammed bin Salman denies this. He says this was rogue elements within the embassy and not at all his direct orders.
Well, yes, he does say that, but the US have plenty of evidence which they have disseminated. And even Donald Trump, who had a very good relationship with him at the time, did have to take a step back and said, well, we don't really know exactly what's happened. But there was a message which emerged, tell your boss the deed is done. Right. It does sound fairly damning. So, of course, the government will get a lot of criticism now for this visit, but they're very keen to get a trade deal. The Gulf Cooperation Council, of which Saudi Arabia is one country, Kemi Badenoch, the Trade Secretary, would love to get a trade deal. It's apparently worth about potentially £1.6 billion to the UK every year. There's that, and the fact that Saudi Arabia are the biggest buyers of our weapons. So politics is a dirty business.
An important ally. Very
an important ally in the region. But Catherine, thank you so much for talking us through the particulars there. It's a really thorny issue.
Very thorny issue indeed. Let us know what you think at home. An activist who helped to launch an all-party parliamentary group on reparations said that African heritage people had special rights because they were in Britain first.
Well, our investigations reporter Charlie Peters has more.
We have a right to be here, not because of being British. We were here before you. We were here before them, but we have a right to be here because of everything that Britain has stolen from us.
Black Britons need to claim land wherever they are. That's according to Esther Stanford-Coze, an activist who helped launch a parliamentary group on reparations for slavery and colonialism.
So we have to claim land wherever we are.
Stanford-Coze said Black Britons had special rights because of colonialism and that African heritage people were in Britain first.
The activist's charged comments in this South London square were not a rare outburst. We've also seen her making charged claims in online talks.
At a panel discussion, she lamented the corporate white stream media.
These are not the ones that often get promoted, and certainly not the ones that the corporate white stream media are amplifying.
Stanford-Coze has also claimed that parts of the Black rights movement have links to the CIA and British intelligence agencies.
This is obviously a good thing, but if you don't realise that it's part of an agenda that involves CIA, MI5, MI6, and some of us know it very well, okay? That's all I can really say on this platform.
She also made air finger quotes while saying that Jews were the most oppressed people on earth. Other panellists at the event broadcast earlier this year made extraordinary comments that Stanford-Coze did not challenge. One speaker quoted biblical scripture that said that Jews belonged to the synagogue of Satan.
The scripture says they say they are Jews, but they are not Jews. And God says, I will make them of the synagogue of Satan.
Warren Alexander Dean, who campaigns for a special currency for black businesses, made controversial remarks about gay men.
This homosexuality thing is part of the black genocide agenda.
Labour MP Belle Ribeiro Addy, who spoke alongside Stanford-Coze in Brixton and who chairs the parliamentary group, asked the Prime Minister to pledge reparations earlier this year. He said no. Alka Segal Cuthbert, from the campaign group Don't Divide Us, said this was the right move.
The far more worrying problem is the political irresponsibility shown by APPG when they take these ideas seriously, because these are ideas that are frankly reintroducing racialised thinking into British society, that it's establishing legitimacy for seeing everything through a racialised lens, and absolutely no good can come of this at all. It's extremely divisive. It sets up not only divisions between black and white citizens, but it also kind of inculcates a hierarchy of oppressions amongst ethnic minorities themselves.
Stanford-Coze is no longer the public inquiry point for the APPG. But Belle Ribeiro Addy still spoke alongside her at the event earlier this month in Brixton. Many will today be asking, why are MPs associating with an activist who makes these claims and has these controversial associations? Charlie Peters, GB News, Brixton.
Well, thanks to Charlie for that concerning report. Well, much more to come, but that's after your news update with Jeff Moody.
Good morning, it's 11:33. I'm Jeff Moody in the GB Newsroom. Train drivers will strike on the 1st of September and overtime will be banned the day after in a long-running dispute over pay. The industrial action will force train companies across England to cancel all services, while the ban on overtime will seriously disrupt the network. It will be the 12th one-day strike by ASLEF members since the dispute started over a year ago. Police in Northern Ireland have arrested a man in connection to the PSNI data breach. A 50-year-old man has been detained in County Londonderry under the Terrorism Act and is being questioned. Another man was arrested yesterday on suspicion of collecting information likely to be useful to terrorists. Last week, the details of 10,000 police officers and staff were published online by mistake, followed by a second breach relating to stolen documents and a laptop. All GP surgeries in England are to move to a digital phone system, potentially ending what the Health Secretary has called the 8 a.m. scramble for appointments. The switch is backed by a £240 million investment from the government and hopes to connect patients with their GP faster. Cornwall Council and Devon and Cornwall Police have said they will turn a blind eye to pubs and clubs who open earlier for the World Cup final this Sunday. The decision comes after Michael Gove wrote to councils across Britain requesting earlier opening times to watch the match. Foreign Secretary James Cleverly and Culture, Media and Sport Secretary Lucy Fraser will be representing the country at the match against Spain on Sunday. Now, you can get more out of all of these stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2727 and €1.1709. The price of gold is £1,487.59 per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 7,256 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for physical investment.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. But
and action.
Sergeant, the big read, my superstar panel that are already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience.
Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 11:39 and you're with Britain's Newsroom here on GB News with me, Tom Harwood, and Emily Carver.
Yes, now lots of you have been getting in touch after our conversation with that GP Lawrence Gurlis, I believe it was.
Yes.
Bernadette has said, you wait for ages and it runs up your phone bill. This is the government are trying to make a difference when it comes to the 8 a.m. scramble.
I'm fairly sure they've announced that before.
They have. £240 million of funding to help GPs, get to grips with the situation, new phone systems, etc. She says, finally get through, no appointments, phone system not the answer, staffing is the answer. Good point.
And Lynn and Alan have also got views on this. They say our GP surgery do have the 8 a.m. call system and it works. If the calls are clogged up, the surgery always calls our number back, and to date, we've been given a same-day appointment. Long may this continue at our GP surgery. Lynn and Alan, where do you live? I want to move there. My goodness, that's incredible. I think you might have a fairly atypical experience. Same day.
Well, some people do, and this is the problem. It is a postcode lottery when it comes to the NHS. Let us know what your experience of GP practices are. But we've also had a view on
the birth rates. The birth rates. We'll start. I'll get to my favourite one a little bit later.
They've collapsed, by the way.
Yes. Robert has said that who wants to raise a child in this country when people are getting taxed to the hilt and streets are not safe?
Well, yes, miserable outlook there, but probably partly to blame.
No, and Simon says people should earn enough money so only one parent has to work and give families the incentives to have children. I mean, we touched on that. The cost of living crisis sort of may be behind this collapse in birth rates. But it was Angela who had the best view, in my view, on this, which was an optimistic one. She says, fear not, we have Boris. Now, I know we don't know quite how many children Boris Johnson has, but I'm not sure he's going to single-handedly make up for this collapse in birth rates.
No, but
perhaps.
if more people, were like Boris,
I'm not sure
we wouldn't have this particular problem.
He has got many good qualities. I'm not sure sort of the moral arbiter of the nation was ever his sort of forte.
No, but in terms of procreation, something to aspire to, perhaps.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to maybe his next...
Can I say that?
Maybe his next column in the Mail will touch... I think he has written on collapsing birth rates, actually.
He probably has.
He does agree that they're a bad thing. But, of course, Jacob Rees-Mogg also has, how many, five children?
He does.
Yeah. Six. I've just been told in my ear 6.
Good Catholic,
and I know this because the 6th is called Sixtus.
Oh, well, that's rather nice, isn't it? Right, let's move on because we have lots of stories and we are joined by journalist and political commentator Chloe Dobbs and also former Green Party deputy leader Shara Ali. Good morning to you both.
Chloe, shall we start with you? You've picked out this story that the Welsh Conservatives are campaigning for the Labour government to reverse the 20-mile-per-hour rule in urban areas. What is this rule?
So there is a new rule that means that in any built-up area, so what this means is anywhere where there are lampposts less than 200 yards apart, the automatic speed limit will now be reduced down to 20 rather than 30. So rather than concentrating on high pedestrian areas like right in the middle of town, it's anywhere with these lampposts. It's going to be at this speed limit. And this is just yet another attack on motorists. Labour, as we've seen with Sadiq Khan's ULEZ expansion, they are very anti-motorists. And drivers, they just feel attacked, so they don't feel like they're listened to, and so people are fighting back. They're tying red ribbons to their cars, which is refers to the Red Flag Act, as it was known as, the first ever speed limit introduced in the world.
Oh, was that when people had to walk in front of the first motor cars with a little red flag?
Yes, when there was a 4 mile per hour speed limit. So I think this is absolutely brilliant that people are standing up against this. I really hope that it gets overturned. Also, what I would say is I like how they are protesting rather than gluing themselves to the road like you-know-who.
Well,
Yes,
Sharad,
that's a good point.
what do you make of that?
Well, I'm broadly in favour of 20 mile per hour speed zones. I think there's a lot of research done into this in terms of minimising expenditure, if anything, on traffic violations and also on road safety. But I think the main thing is that we're not all just motorists. Even those of us who drive cars are also pedestrians. We might want to use cycleways. This is taking everybody into account in a more integrated transport plan. What needs to happen here, because I do think it's highly justifiable, is persuasion needs to happen, more consultation clearly needs to happen. Maybe there needs to be some discussion around whether it's just wholesale all these roads with particular types of street furniture, whether there can be a bit of accommodation there. But in terms of, you know, the overall street scene, I think it's very important that people get used to driving slower. There is more moving metal than there's been before, and there's more risk of harm and danger to pedestrians.
Depending on the road, though, it does feel like you're going backwards at 20 miles per hour. It really does, Tom.
Chloe, what do you say to those who would say, you know, outside of school, why would there be fast-moving traffic? You know, there are some areas where clearly perhaps this would be an appropriate solution.
Absolutely. I completely agree that in areas where there are lots of children, lots of pedestrians on a busy high street where people darting in and out of the road, of course it should be 20. I wouldn't dare drive down the high street in my town going more than 20. But on my way home, I drive down a road where there are just trees either side, no houses, no shops, not a pedestrian in sight, and it's all 20 because of this one-size-fits-all policy. That is where I have a problem, and that is why Welsh people are standing up against this, quite rightly.
Well, let's move on now, because, Sharad, you've picked out a story from Denmark. What's going on here?
Well, this is a story reported by Society for Evidence-Based Gender Medicine. Now, the Denmark Medical Association have just produced a paper which is drawing attention to a phenomenon which we've actually seen in this country as well, and lots of Western countries, including Finland and Sweden, which is an exponential rise over a decade of children presenting with gender incongruence or perhaps being diagnosed with gender dysphoria. So the key question now, and we've had a increasing debate in this country as well, is how to treat medically such children. So the increase has been, in Denmark, 4 children referred to a paediatric gender identity clinic in 2014, rising to 352 in 2022. That's an 8,700% increase. But the point of the story is that whilst as recently as 2018, 65% of those children were being referred to a pathway of puberty blockers leading to cross-sex hormones and potentially surgery with potentially life-changing irreversible effects. Now that number has gone right down to 6%. So this is very important because there's an increasing debate around the utility, the health benefits and prospective harms, which are considerable, particularly when you take into account detransition rates of minors or teenagers. There is a big debate now about what is the best way to go. And in this country, we've also got something called the Cass Review. Hilary Cass has been reviewing the methodology. We've got a consultation out in the NHS as we speak around what paediatric gender clinics should be doing, and we're moving towards, and this is part of that trend, a more holistic approach, psychosocial support being given, and less resort to what people call gender affirmation, which is this irreversible, I would say, experimental use of drugs, which potentially life-changing harmful effects on children. I think this is a very significant development.
Now, people at home might be a little bit surprised to hear that the former deputy leader of the Green Party is saying, sort of, slow down on this stuff. That's a bit out of step with the rest of your party.
Well, firstly, I would say that there's a lot of policy mission creep happens in political parties, and the Green Party is no exception. When you look at our policy, we are very hot on proper due diligence, medical due diligence. Our co-leader, even just last autumn, finally had the guts to talk about the Cass review for the first time I'd heard him talk about it, and evidence-based. So we are an evidence-based political party. We should not be endorsing gender affirmation route if we're looking at the current evidence. So I would say this is wholly in line with Green Party policy, moving towards holistic care, where we're looking at comorbidity as well. There is insufficient research on why there is this exponential trend. Girls in particular.
You might say this is in line with Green Party policy. I think there might be some people in the Green Party who would disagree with you.
Well, let them disagree, but let them argue, because I've been able to. I've been able to argue. I mean, this is possibly one of the reasons that I'm facing court with the Green Party next week, because I was unceremoniously removed as a spokesperson just over a year ago.
And do you think that's because you hold more gender-critical beliefs?
Well, I would regard it, putting aside what counts as gender-critical, this is a rational, evidence-based piece of research.
You're concerned about children going down
that's the other thing,
where they are affirmed in their gender dysphoria and end up having surgery, puberty blockers, that could prevent them from having children in the future. Irreparable harm, essentially.
Absolutely.
Sounds like you're thoroughly sensible. I worry that parties like the Green Party jump on progressive bandwagons and don't always think things through, and they're scared of having rational debate because they don't want to be seen as bigoted or on the nasty side of a particular issue. And I think we've got to be more grown up about that.
100%. And it's the no debate stance which is causing this refusal to look at things in the round, empirically, scientifically, and I think we've got to get beyond that. It doesn't benefit anybody to institute irrevocable harm, potentially, on children. And I would say, finally, that of all the vulnerable people in society, children, some of whom may not yet have capacity to consent, they are the ones who deserve to have their welfare and their benefits, health benefits, put front and centre of every politician's mind.
Just finally on this topic, and we will get to Chloe, your story next. I know you've been sitting. But do you think it was your position on these issues around gender that led to you to lose that deputy leadership role within the Green Party?
Well, some of this is going to be cause for litigation, of course, but I will simply say this, is that I challenge, and I've always challenged the assertion, the allegation that I have breached the Speaker's Code of Conduct. And I've been putting, just as an ordinary member, motions to conference which have been found to be properly in order around these topics, because there hasn't been sufficient development of policy in our party. But I was doing that as a member, and I still am a member.
And the challenge is that you broke that code of conduct, but you would say that you did not.
Part of the reason given, in insufficient detail, I won't go into too much detail for obvious reasons, but part of the reason given for my removal as a spokesperson was alleged breach of the Speaker's Code of Conduct, which I challenge, I contest, and I,
Well, it's a fascinating case, and Shahab, thank you for going into detail. And Chloe, I hope you don't mind with us just diving into that one a little bit more deeply. But you've picked out this story that is on the front page of the Telegraph about France stopping fewer migrants despite more money.
Yes, so Rishi Sunak agreed a deal with the French in March to give them £480 million over 3 years to stop the boats, which is a lot more than the 54 million that we gave them in 2021. Yet the numbers have gone down on the number of boats they are stopping. So it is estimated that the French have stopped between January and now about 13,000 migrants. But this time last year, it was 17,000. Now, there may be the weather and some other factors playing into that, but it's clear that we're probably not getting value for money. And there's a little bit of explanation here as to why we are not seeing much progress. So, for example, the French on the beaches, they're unwilling to do joint patrols with the British. They're only allowing them to stand and watch, which is very strange. They're also refusing to stop boats once they are in the sea. So they've been slashing some boats that haven't left shore yet to deflate them. But then what's happening is these migrants aren't actually being detained and arrested. So they just get on the next boat that's going. It's not very effective. And the taxpayer, on top of the 6 million a day that's being wasted on these hotels, this is just 480 million. It just feels like it's money going down the drain.
What do you think it is that the French, the Coast Guard in France are perhaps not being as effusive as they might be?
So one thing that this article does mention is that obviously there is a lot of unrest going on in France at the moment, so hence some of their police and forces are being moved away from the border. It's not as much of a priority. But what the British are saying are, let us do joint patrols, tell us when you need us to step in, and we will. But they're not wanting to cooperate with them, which is really strange.
I think a lot of people write in saying that the French are just doing what's in their own interests and just letting the migrants pass. But, you know, they'd refute that, of course.
No, it is absolutely fascinating. And thank you both, Chloe Dobbs and Shirar Ali, for talking us through those stories. We didn't get through absolutely everything, but we did drill down where it mattered. Thank you both for your time this morning. That's it for us on Britain's Newsroom today. But coming up next, it's the Live Desk.
Hello, lots to come on this Friday lunchtime on the Live Desk on GB News, including where are you going to be watching the England game? Will it be at home? Will it be at a pub? Because if you're expecting to get a pint early on Sunday morning, you might have a little bit of a problem. We will be discussing this. Maybe you're a pub landlord who's willing to bend the rules. Do get in touch. And also, brace yourselves for Storm Betty. It's sweeping across the south of this country. Where has summer gone?
Lovely stuff.
Absolutely. Well, that's coming up right after this. Do catch us back next week, Monday to Friday here on Britain's Newsroom. But next, it's the Live Desk.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Low pressure is arriving overnight, increasingly strong winds ahead of it, heavy rain as well, and the risk of thunderstorms, especially for eastern parts of England during the early hours of Saturday. Here's the low that's approaching, developing quickly. That's going to bring strengthening winds both ahead and during the period in which that low pressure crosses the UK. But before the low arrives, actually, showery rain pushes north, easing for a time, drier conditions for Scotland, northeast England and southern parts for a time. Some sunshine coming through, but a lot of cloud, and with the breeze as well, it's not going to feel particularly hot. 23, 24 Celsius, albeit with increased humidity. Then the low pushes in. Very strong winds developing across western parts. Gales through Irish Sea coast in particular, and West Wales at the southwest of England seeing the strongest winds during the evening. During the early hours, we're going to see thunderstorms develop across eastern parts of England, heavy rain pushing into Scotland and Northern Ireland, sweeping through elsewhere, and a very warm night to come.